Welcome to Mindless Entertainment. My name is Jesse Milestone, and I read something today that just tickled me because I read this article about a totally different film, that being Into the Spider-Verse, which just brought to mind things that we already know, but it really hammered home the fact for me that Rian Johnson is an idiot. He is just a complete bumbling moron when it comes to crafting a screenplay. And the people who wrote Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse are just a world above, they're eons above, where the highest height he could ever hope to achieve. So this thing that I read, and now if you probably have an issue with humor in The Last Jedi, if you were awake during that film, which honestly I wouldn't fault you if you weren't, because why would you be? Sleeping would have been a much more comfortable experience. So, I had a problem with it. I watched a great recent video just dissecting that exact issue with it, and it's that the tone of the humor isn't consistent with a movie that's trying to take itself seriously. In fact, it's a lot more consistent with like a satire or a parody film. Now, I'm reading this Into the Spider-Verse. Into the Spider-Verse, now, this is a comedy, by the way. This is a comedic film, obviously. If you've seen it, you know this. And there were things injected into this movie specifically for comic relief, like Spider-Ham, which it took me a while to come around to on Spider-Ham, Peter Porker, because for me, like, I don't love puns, first of all, so that was just a big turnoff in the first place. But the way that they remain dedicated to fitting this character to making this character true to his reality, as well as fit into the reality he's now come to be a part of, really won me over. So I'm reading this article that talks about a recent podcast that Rodney Rotham did. He's one of the co-writers and co-directors of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. So he's one of the co-writers, co-directors, and he talked about a joke that was cut last minute from the film. That this joke made it all the way into the screen tests, and it fucking slayed in the screen tests. And they took it out of the film. Why? Well, here you go. Here's the context, right? So there's a moment, this is not really a spoiler if you haven't seen it, there's just a moment where the various Spider-Mans from the Spider-Verses are sort of sharing a loss that they went through that sort of made them the person they are today. And so when it gets to Peter Porker, he's like, I lost my Uncle Frankfurter. And the original line had him saying, he was electrocuted and it smelled delicious. Which is hysterical. It's really funny. And apparently, I mean, of course, it was killing in all the screen tests. Everyone was cracking up at that line. But just before this went to be released, they realized something very important about this moment. They realized that as funny as this moment is, and it is partially because it's so unexpected in the moment, is that it's not true to the reality they had built. Is that they're using, this line was a cheap laugh that undercut the reality and the narrative they had created. And they did an excellent job in the entire rest of the film, and they've made the right call on this joke, absolutely, as funny of a line as that is, where you didn't see them undercut their serious moments with humor. They're moments that were intended to be humorous early on when we see I just blanked on his name. Black Spider-Man. Miles Morales. When you see Miles Morales chicken out of jumping off the roof, that's funny. And it's funny because we're in this growing pain stage of this boy going through puberty and dealing with his new superpowers, which, I mean, let's be honest, the Super Spider-Man gaining his powers has always clearly been an allegory for puberty. In addition to everything else it means and stuff like that. There's definitely that allegorical element there of like, I don't understand what's happening to my body. So to have that moment played for comedy makes sense. But then later on in the film, when he actualizes and becomes the man he's meant to be, you don't see that, right? You don't see him turning into this super action hero and zipping into a tree or a building, right? Because they understood the tonal differences in the different moments of the movie. So when they get to this line, they realize, man, that line is so good, but it totally undercuts this serious moment we're trying to have. It totally pulls focus from this deep emotional message we're trying to convey. We're not going to do that to ourselves because we take our film seriously. Not like, oh, it's so serious, but like we believe in our message and in our content. We believe in the story that we're trying to tell, and we're not going to cheapen that story for the sake of one laugh. And that was such a mature decision, such a not precious decision. People get so precious about their screenplays. It's so clever and brilliant that it really draws us such a parallel to, moments in The Last Jedi where we're going to have this really intense battle where rebel lives are going to be lost and it's going to be tragic, and we're going to undercut the weight of that entire first battle by having Poe show up and just troll Hux and have this ridiculous comedic comic relief that totally does not fit in the world at all. It is not consistent with anything we've seen in this universe before, and it's there for just a laugh and to take you out of it, to reference very modern, pop things in our culture like trolling. That's not a thing in the Star Wars universe. So it pulls you out of it, it takes you out of it, and it cheapens and undercuts that moment. Or likewise, when you get to the throne room scene and the big fight and this big whole crazy moment of Rey having to confront Snoke and fighting for her life. You first have this random cutaway to the droid in the hallway that just drives into the wall for no reason. Like, the only reason that was there is like, have some stupid comic relief of this droid malfunctioning in the throes of what's supposed to be one of the most dramatic, intense moments of the film. And then again, the fight scene, right? Star Wars doesn't do slapstick, so why is it in the middle of my super serious fight scene that's supposed to be like the choreographed masterpiece of the film? It wasn't, by the way. It was terrible. You have someone falling into what was basically a giant blender and having his inexplicably, again, not true to reality, the shards of his robe just go poofing out for no reason. It's moments like that draw such a contrast. I mean, that's the same idea as this line of, let me talk about how upsetting it was that my electrocuted uncle smelled like bacon. And realizing, wait, shit, that's funny, and we wrote it because we're comedians and we know what's funny, so we wrote something funny in here, but we're also self-aware about our entire work to realize and understand that this does not serve the story. And Rian Johnson has none of that intelligence whatsoever, has none of that ability to look at his script and his craft and do that. And moments like that, when a screenwriter, a director can come out and say that, and say like, look, we made this call, we cut out something that we wrote that was freaking brilliant, and we knew it was brilliant, and we put an axe in it because it didn't serve the story. When people have that awareness and that maturity to come out and say that really, for me, just does a beautiful job of highlighting how those are qualities that Rian Johnson does not have. And it just tickles me to know that if he did happen to listen to this podcast or see this article, there's a part of him somewhere deep down that feels that as a personal criticism, because he knows that he did not do the same thing and that he could not do the same thing. And maybe looking at that, oh wow, at the very last minute, let alone like, not just that we wrote our first draft and threw it on the screen, we wrote our first draft, we cut things out, we changed things. They talk in that interview again about the way they were going to have a Andrew Garfield Spider-Man and a Tobey Maguire Spider-Man in the movie, and they were like, no, that's just confusing, and it doesn't make sense. It's fun for us. We want to play with that. We want to do that thing. And a Tom Holland Spider-Man as well. But they ultimately chose not to do what was fun for them or what they thought was cool. They ultimately chose to do what served the story best. So I really hope that Rian Johnson reads things like this, because I know when he does, there's going to be a part just niggling in the back of his mind where he realizes, oh, I am not that caliber of filmmaker. And if he doesn't, guys, just send him this video. Just at Rian Johnson away if he hasn't blocked you yet. Just so we all can know. Just so we know that he knows. Just so we know that he knows that we know how effing stupid he is. If you enjoyed this video, click that like button. If you have things to add or talk about or want to tell me how great and fluffy my hair is, there's a comment section for that. Make sure you subscribe and hit that notifications bell so you know when I am bringing you new videos. You guys are awesome. Thank you for listening.